Without vision, execution is just a dream, and vision without influence rarely even gets off the ground. Our guest today, Saddeek, has spent his career helping Fortune 500 executives, entrepreneurs, and sales leaders not only create compelling visions, but also communicate them clearly, adapt them under pressure, and rally people to bring them to life. He's an Amazon best-selling author, co-author of Meaning: How Leaders Create Meaning and Clarity During Times of Crisis and Opportunity. He also wrote the book Start with a Vision and co-authored The Road to Success with Jack Canfield of Chicken Soup for the Soul fame. So I'm really excited to have him on here. From his work at Cisco, Deloitte, and Oracle to building his own seven-figure consulting firm, Ash has seen what happens when leaders nail the vision and what happens when they don't. Today, we're going to dive into the practical side of vision, how to establish it, communicate it, adapt it, and influence people to align with it. So Ash, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Mason. Very excited.
So when a CEO or leader is setting a vision, what distinguishes a powerful, compelling vision from one that's just corporate wallpaper?
I think the most important thing that we've seen leaders, the ones that do this really well, have the ability to actually travel in time. They go into the future X years out, and they actually stand on the scene and they look around. And maybe they're working for a healthcare company or a financial services company or any other business, whether that's small, medium sized, or large. But what they actually do is they spend some time thinking about who is the person or persons that we are trying to transform the experience thereof. And they travel to that future and they look around and they see delightful experiences. And then they get so excited, they come back and they can't wait to tell everybody about it. They can't wait to get everybody else fired up about it. And that's the difference. It's the main point would be to really focus on what is it that you want to change and how amazingly it's going to be once you achieve that change.
Okay. So what's the most practical framework or method that you've seen leaders use to crystallize their vision into something that's actionable?
What they will need to do is really concentrate on that future state and what's happening within that future state, whether it's an amazing improved customer service experience or patient experience or employee experience. And from that point, take those descriptors and then come back and help everybody understand how much this is going to be so helpful for those audiences, for those target users, whether it's again, it's the patient or the employee or someone else. And then based on that clear understanding of what it is that they need to help achieve in that transformation, they come back and then they need to really deconstruct what that will mean for the organization, for the employees, and for everybody else. So this ability to share the story, but then also be able to break it down is how people will see this is not a ivory tower imagination of a future, but really a very solid plan for how do we get from the vision to the reality of what we want to achieve.
Can you give maybe an example or some tips on things that might make that a little bit more clear? Because I mean, a lot of folks hear that stuff and they start thinking pie in the sky, egghead theories, grandiose plans. But like on the practical level, do you have some tips or some examples of companies that have done it right, or people or leaders that have done it right?
Absolutely. So we look at one of the example I love, which is Kaiser Permanente, which is a healthcare company, and what they have done is that they focused on the patient experience, and they basically looked at the current situation. The current situation was a lot of the patient data was all over the place in different applications, and a lot of the time when that patient wanted to schedule an appointment, it was very, very, very hard. So getting close to what that experience looks like and understanding what are the pain points today and spending some time documenting those pain points, speaking to some of those audience members, maybe it is those patients and other people that interact with them, and getting a very clear plan of what those pain points are, and then coming back and then saying, how much can we bite in terms of a future vision where we will transform that experience? And also, what is the level of readiness that the organization will have to be at in order for us to achieve those changes? And A lot of the time, this is not an easy thing to do because usually older organizations that have been around for a long time, they have so much already in the company that they use every single day that they build so much expertise on. And now you or I come around and basically tell them we have to change all of this in order for us to improve our patient experience. Then it takes a lot of wisdom to understand the impact of the change and having to help everybody understand how do we move from step one to step launch and then get everybody to enjoy this new vision.
So, like you and I both know, employees are just constantly bombarded by messages, and sometimes it's overwhelming. And it's understandable how sometimes it can seem to go in one ear and out the other. But is there any way, or do you have any tips that leaders can implement to communicate vision in a way that really cuts through the clutter and sticks?
The best way is to really spend some time on what we call the aspiration, spending some time understanding where we want to go, how we want to get there, and then come back and think about how do we actually achieve inspiration? How do we get everybody else energized to see what we see? Because a lot of the time you'll see leaders walking around with that excitement on their face and everybody's wondering what's going on. And that's why you basically tell them you have to move from aspiration, that dream that you have, to inspiration, which means I have to actually talk to every individual in my company. I have to do this at scale myself by talking to large groups, as well as talk to my leaders so they can take that same message and help cascade it down. A lot of the time, what we see, and in that meaning book, what we see the really fantastic leaders and organizations do is they understand the importance of making sure we take our time to develop the level of desire, not just in us, but in everybody else. And that's why it's very important to, again, reflect on this concept of from aspiration to inspiration. And then, of course, everybody else would be interested to move to the third stage, which is how do we execute? But
Gotcha.
definitely spending some time inspiring and influencing, that's where we can take the level of excitement and desire to a much higher level. Otherwise, everybody is like, why is Mason doing this to us? Whereas if we spend some time understanding what that aspiration is, what it means for everybody, then we are inspired to see, oh my God, can you just imagine when that patient experience is the kind of patient experience Mason is talking about? I can see why he's talking to us about it. Now it becomes something that everybody else owns.
Great. So, and I know that you've helped design experiences for audiences, tens of thousands of people. What, if anything, changes when you're communicating a vision to one person or a small team, when compared to like a massive organization? What changes, if anything?
I think what changes is getting really close to understanding that if I'm speaking to a large group, I need to find common threads that may connect all of us. Maybe it's the human experience, maybe the fact that we all are at some level, sometimes we are that patient. So if you can help personalize it for the audience, if you're speaking with a much larger audience, but then when you're speaking one on one, you want to hopefully come up with something that will connect the dots for that person based on their experience. Think the story that you're going to tell by first asking a few questions about their own experience. That really gives you a wonderful platform to connect with that individual. But definitely, if you're speaking with a larger audience, look for those common human experiences that we all face and how we must have seen examples where it wasn't ideal and we wanted it to be. I always talk about the example of a mom walking into the lobby of a hospital and trying to get the attention of the nurse, and all they talk to her about is the paperwork and whether or not she has her insurance card. Whereas the most important thing that should happen is someone needs to look at that baby.
Right.
So
Yes.
there's definitely a discrepancy between the ideal and what happens now. And leaders speaking to large groups can definitely benefit from that human experience.
Gotcha. In your book, Meaning, you wrote about clarity during crisis. And my question for you is, how should leaders adapt their vision when circumstances change dramatically?
I think they should really have a moment with their teams where they come to a moment of honesty and truth and basically say, this is what we hoped for, this is the reality of the situation, but I want to remind everybody that we've been there before. So helping people see that there is a lot of history that they can stand on, and build some resilience on. Because a lot of the time, of course, in the moment, we may be running, or we may be basically, the crisis is causing everybody to be in crisis mode. But leaders are the ones who are going to basically then kind of bring the moment of clarity for everybody by focusing on how they themselves are dealing with the situation. And then, of course, we very much recommend that they be vulnerable in a way that helps the audience see that, whatever we're feeling, this person is feeling as well. We can tell. Like, I remember at Cisco, John Chambers, during the financial crisis, one of the audience members, right after he finished speaking, and then he came to the edge of the stage, he literally sat down at the edge of the stage, and she said to him, "John, how are you doing?" And I think it's very important for leaders to realize that people want to know, in addition to perhaps the big talk or the big picture, let's come down to the fact that at the end of the day, these leaders are also human beings who are experiencing the situation and feeling it. And I think some of that goes a long way with the audience. They can basically then see, wait a second, he feels it too. He knows we're going through some tough times. And you know what? We're going to come through this.
That's a good point. I appreciate you sharing that, because I think back and how many times people are just like, oh, they don't understand. People being employees in general, the boss is clueless, the boss doesn't understand, and the boss may be not clueless and understand very clearly, but if there's that disconnect, that's just a missed opportunity. And I love your advice there. So, how do you know when a vision should stay firm versus when it's smarter to let it evolve?
It's definitely smart to let it evolve and be open to letting people in the very beginning, when you're sharing with them a very aspirational vision, that if and when we have to adjust parts of that vision, I want you to know that I will be the first person that will come to you and share with you what is it that we have to adjust and why. Because I think it's very important for us from the get-go to see the vision development as a co-creation opportunity. The leader can definitely go to that future that you and I talked about at the very beginning, but also be willing to come back and say, here's what I saw, and I want to validate some of that. I want to co-create some of that with you. And that's really where design thinking and workshops come in handy, because then everybody gets involved. And then if need be, to your point, if we need to make some changes, the piece about communicating and communicating and communicating comes in very handy, because once you are doing this on a regular basis, it does not come across as, oh my goodness, there's something that happened and now he has to communicate with us. The beauty of it is he's been communicating with us on an ongoing basis. And because of that, then he's coming and letting us know that we have to adjust some parts of that vision. So the key thing is for leaders to realize that even though it might feel as an additional amount of effort, communicating on a regular basis is the best thing that you can do, because then at least you are stepping into the void and helping them understand what's happening, instead of having them start to fill that void with some assumptions.
So, how do you know when a vision should stay firm versus evolve? When if someone's leading and they always have that choice: do we persist or do we pivot? What signs exist to help leaders determine when they should persevere or pivot with their vision?
I think a lot of the time there are external signs that they have to keep paying attention to, how much the customers are adopting some of the changes that you're making. So adoption metrics is something that we very much recommend for leaders to kind of keep an eye on. And those adoption metrics will let us know whether or not what we're working on is meeting the expectations of those
So,
customers.
what are
So
some of those adoption metrics? Can you give me some
some of the
examples?
adoption metrics. Absolutely. So for example, let's say if I am putting in front of my customers a particular selection on the screen, and they keep coming to that screen, and not really selecting that particular option, there is an indication from me here that from an experience standpoint, it's not resonating with the audience. So what we need to do is we need to get a usage metric that tells us how much of what we're putting in front of those audience is being used versus not used. And also, what's the frequency? That's another factor that we always would look at, is how many of them are using it and how frequently are they using it. So definitely those metrics, very simple to think of, but very important. And that's really where we might miss out on capturing the changes. but paying attention to how many, how often, and then making the tough decisions whereby we can see we were hoping that they would be using this. We were hoping that this would add value, and it's not adding value. And maybe what we need to do is actually have some conversations with some of them. If we can go that extra mile, we might get even better clarity as to why. Because sometimes we may have designed the product in a certain way, and the customer may have a whole different perception.
So, along those same lines, what strategies do leaders use to get buy in from people who are skeptical or people who aren't naturally aligned with the vision?
The one thing that we always recommend, it's this idea of enrollment, where we basically say, in order for you to get everybody on board, you have to go in. And the first thing you do is you get curious. You want to find out what is it that they're working on? What are their own aspirations? If they had the time of day to transform a particular business process that they're working on or a particular application that they have, what would they do? So spending some time getting curious with them instead of coming with already a pre-configured plan of what that vision might be, this shows that you're really coming to co-create the vision with them. Even though you may have several stages of that vision already developed, it's very important for us to honor the fact that a lot of these people have so many years of experience doing what they do. And of course, vision means change, and change creates a lot of anxiety. So coming with that understanding and that wisdom that a lot of what I'm talking about is going to create a lot of anxiety and stress for the person I'm talking to, I should then take a deep breath and say, hey, you know what? I realize this is going to be a lot of change. I'm going
So,
to do this in a way that honors you.
so along the same vein here, like, because I think you're hitting on something that I think's relevant to a lot of people that are going to be listening. When you talk about co-creation, do you have some tips or some examples of leaders who have been able to take their personal vision and how do I phrase that? Blend it more into a shared team vision or co-create. What are some of the tips of co-creation and cooperation so that some of those people who might have resisted in the past will now feel like they are a co-creator, contributor, and it's a collaborative effort? There's got to be some tips or strategies or techniques that you've seen work consistently. What are some of those?
Absolutely. So what I've seen at Workday as well as at Cisco is we basically see leaders perhaps coming up with the broad vision. And the next step would be for us to go through that process of co-creation in the form of design thinking workshops, where the first thing in the design thinking process is this word empathy, where we basically say we need to look at that patient experience and start to put ourselves in their shoes. And then in order for us to be rounded, we need to also look at those changes that we're going to make, how they're going to impact our own team members who are serving those patients, to look at it from the outside as well as from the inside. And by having the teams go through these workshops and spending some time in that empathy stage, we will uncover from them how they can see these processes getting better, as well as also uncovering the change impact. And the change impact is what's going to give me the wisdom to understand what is the approach that I need to take in order to weave these changes through the system, by definitely understanding where they are at, where how can we get them to the destination we think we need to get there, and also how do we manage the change along. So this will be how you would do it to make sure people are co-creating it with you.
So I think the key word there that I took from your answer was empathy, because my follow-up question would be, how do leaders align departments with competing priorities around one vision? And I'm guessing that part of that answer is probably the sitting through your workshop and whatnot and getting people to have empathy for what the others are going through so they understand internally, because you talked externally, but when you're talking about internal departments with competing priorities around one vision, there has to be some empathy. Hey, that's not my problem. That's their problem. Having some empathy for it. Can you expound on that? I'm just kind of absorbing what you're having to say, and I'm curious what
It, it
your thoughts
it
are there.
definitely becomes a beautiful experience, to your point, when you are in those design workshop sessions and you're doing the empathy stage and you're looking at the experience based on, if you're looking at it from the outside and you're looking at it from that patient experience, and then you're coming back and realizing there are 5 different departments that are participating in that process. And we start to then chart out all of those interactions. And to your point, we come back and we basically talk to them and think about how do we do this in a way that will make it possible so it can happen successfully. And of course, to your point, there will be some resistance from some of the departments. Maybe some other departments will see it as an opportunity. Others will see it as the source of a lot of pain. And that's really where those who are in the room, who are wearing the hat of change management and change leadership, they need to be paying attention to those conversations, to your point, because those resistance pockets will show up as part of those conversations. And we need somebody to be sitting almost like a fly on the wall, watching for those dynamics and then capturing those moments, because that means there's work that we're going to be doing from a and change management and leadership perspective that will help us get to where we're going. So it's not going to be just about how do we take process A from current state to future state, but also this cohesive tissue weaving work that needs to happen. And I think that's really what you're driving at, is there's going to be a whole lot more work than meets the eye to make this
Well,
happen.
one of my favorite quotes is, "No pain is too great for people that don't have to feel it." And if you got
Exactly.
some of those departments out there like, "Hey, man, things are going great for us. That's not a problem with us. We're good," but it's creating massive pain for some other silos or other departments, then I think it's which is one of the reasons why I wanted to invite you on to talk today, because I know that that is a skill that top executives have to master to be able to get competing priorities, and departments are supposed to work well on their own and together to unify under one vision. When some people are feeling more pain than others, that's a specific skill.
Absolutely. And we end up, when we look at it from a change management expertise perspective, we realize that we have to work through the system by working with the leaders and working with the next level leaders and working with the next level key individuals. We basically call them change agents or champions, so that we can bring that wisdom that we have about how change is going to happen by really working through the system and working through the emotions of everybody involved, to activate leadership from a sponsor perspective. Because if they see the leadership team focusing on this, if they see their own bosses focusing on this, then it becomes more and more a reality that this is the direction we're going. We definitely need to work through the resistance pockets and find out why, and do it in a way that shows wisdom and understanding of what people are going through.
Because, I mean, let's be real. If you don't do these things, the consequences can be severe. When you talk about resistance, resistance can go to sabotage like that. And you have unintended consequences and a whole new set of issues and a whole new set of problems that you weren't prepared to deal with yet. So, what you're describing and what your approach entails is really solving a lot of those unnecessary problems before they occur. So,
And yeah,
what's the most common mistakes CEOs make when they're trying to rally people around a vision? I mean, there's got to be some common screw ups out there. What are some of the things that you see people do on a regular basis that they shouldn't be doing?
I think the main one is telling them once and then thinking that now it's done. So you come out, they share with you what that vision is, and they go off. And a lot of the time, it actually requires constant reminding, constant repetition of why we're doing what we're doing, because otherwise there's so many other priorities that are going to come and take the front page of the newspaper for them every day. And you need to interject that flow of news and keep making sure that your top piece of news is top of mind for them as well. So that's one key mistake that they make. The other one is they also make the assumption that the leadership team is cascading the message. So what we want them to do is to make sure that that's actually happening by having sessions with everybody within the organization, where they are really testing out whether or not the cascade is happening. So they have to spend some time doing town halls that allows the rest of the organization to hear them directly. That means you are making sure that if the leadership team is not cascading as effectively as you might want them to, then you have a risk management step by you coming into and doing these town halls. A lot of this takes a lot of time and effort, and we recommend that leaders look for helpers, whether it's from a messaging perspective, rallying the teams together. Sometimes you may want to even encourage them to go to a particular leaders meeting, and then you become a guest speaker. And again, the goal is to make sure everybody sees that the top leadership team sees this as something that's very important. We have to make sure it does happen, as well as our leaders are also reiterating the same message. What I've seen in large organizations, they get so good at this. They understand that in order for us to get things done, we have to keep.
I'm curious, you mentioned the first mistake was that they say it once and assume that it got through. Second of all, they don't follow through to make sure that the message that they have put out cascaded to throughout the organization. I'm almost wondering if it isn't a mistake because we feel like, oh, we sent out the email, we sent out the memo, and assuming that people got it, opened it, or paid attention. When people are so flooded with stuff, if I would assume, and you're the expert in this area, but I'm just sitting there thinking out loud, thinking, how many times are these leaders sending something out one way as opposed to reaching out to the employees in all of the different ways? Some people might respond to text. Some people might respond to email. Some might respond to company memos. Some might be responding to somebody came in and spoke in the lunchroom or came into my department and spoke. If I'm running an organization, I would want to use all of those methods to make it almost impossible to ignore so that I had certainty that the message got to everybody the way they like to receive information or are most receptive.
Without a doubt, I love what you're saying because a lot of the time when we're doing these change efforts, we also have to think about, like in the case of the San Francisco airport, we had some people working at the airport where the only way you could actually get their attention is by posting something in the break room. They don't have laptops, they don't have phones, they are walking around with the walkie-talkies. They have certain very important tasks that they have to do, so they cannot be sitting in front of a laptop. So I love what you said because you need to think about the audience and how they like to receive information. In this case, the best place would be a poster in the break room. That's how you got their attention.
Sure.
And right next to all of the other posters that they usually look at. Otherwise, to your point, I could be, sitting and imagining, oh, I just got it sent and they must have read it. No, they haven't.
It's funny because I'm embarrassed to admit, but I'm just being real. I've got over 100,000 emails that are unopened sitting in my inbox right now. And do I go through them? Yes, but if it's not somebody that I recognize or an issue that's coming up or whatnot, like if someone wants to get a hold of me, the best way is you pick up the phone, you call me, or you come see me. Text maybe a little bit, but I'm so overwhelmed with email. It's if someone looks at me like, "Well, I sent you the email," like, so from your research, how does a clearly communicated vision create deeper meaning with the folks that you're trying to get to be part of your mission or your vision?
Absolutely. So, communicating a deeper meaning, we usually talk about this idea of a greater purpose. We need to make sure that a lot of the time people may forget why a particular organization was born, what the initial mission was. And great leaders will anchor a lot of the messaging in what that main mission is and what that main purpose is. Not just about the vision, but let's say we got into healthcare because we care so much about people's health and we want to be one of the catalysts in improving that. Or we got into financial services because we believe in helping people become financially independent. So that greater purpose is something that can help us anchor our vision conversations because it basically gives us the why. The vision is really more about how and what we want to improve a particular situation, but the mission and the purpose give us that strategic why and that long-term why that we want to achieve it. And then it helps everybody see, oh my goodness, that makes sense then, because that's why this company was started in the first place. And that's the same audience that we are serving or segment of people that we are serving. So therefore, I can see why Mason's talking to me about this.
Um, you know what? Actually, I hesitate to do this, but I'm actually going to give a shout out to a lady by the name of Patty Penny. Founded a company called PenMac in Springfield, Missouri, and it was at one point it was the largest female-owned business in the state, and I think it was in the top 100 for Inc. I think at one point Inc. somewhere in the 80s for largest privately held women-owned businesses. Anyway, she ran a temporary agency, and she did hard things because it was right. She's kind of a legend in Springfield, Missouri. If someone pulled up onto her at corporate headquarters in a beat up van with a family and someone needed work, she would call the YMCA and say, "Hey, I've got someone for you. They're here to clean. They're going to work with you." And she would do day pay. Was that difficult? Was it extra work? Was it a hassle to the employees? Yes, 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 and yes. But her vision for I want anybody who wants to work and needs money, I'm going to be a vehicle and a conduit for them. She did that. She found out in Springfield that there was a large population of companies that wanted temporary help, but their requirement was that the employees had a GED and or a diploma. And there was a lot of folks that didn't have a GED. So she literally bought a building, got accredited somehow, and taught courses. She didn't, but she hired people to teach courses to help these people get GEDs so that they could be employable. Are you starting to see a pattern here? That's extra work. That's extra effort. But she had that vision and she practiced what she preached. And let me think of another one she did. She did if people didn't have reliable transportation or the bus stops weren't available or whatever it was, she went out and bought vans and hired drivers to pick people up and to take them from work and from work home. So when you start talking about a vision for a temporary employment agency, yes, that's what the company did. But as far as a vision of deeper meaning, she set out a vision for everyone there and she led by example, like we're going to help people who need it. And we're going to give them opportunities and we're not going to let what ordinarily would be obstacles for other people stop us from delivering this. And the people that she has, they understand that vision and they are happy to go the extra mile and to do the extra work and to do the extra hassles because they know that they're blessed enough to have good jobs and good careers in a company that has a culture like that. When you talk about communicating vision and deeper meaning, like that resonates with me and people that I know. So shout out to Patty Penny at Penmac in Springfield, Missouri, because that's how she rolls. So if we fast forward 5 years from now, how do you think the practice of vision setting and communication will evolve for CEOs and leaders?
I think now, of course, everybody's talking about AI, and I think people are going to look for leaders to help them visualize the future in a lot more detail because now we have tools that can help us visualize even more.
That's true.
So I think the leaders will be able to travel into the future, look at the situation, how much it has improved. But then hopefully with the tools that we have today, we will be able to create amazing visualizations for what something might look like. And all of a sudden, people are going to be standing in front of it and pointing and seeing where they will land in that vision. So I think that's a big part of what we will see happening is that people will be able to create simulations, visualizations in a whole lot easier way, which will help the conversation get a lot more concrete because they can see a potential visualization for what might look like. A lot of software applications will be much more easily visualized with the use of AI, that we will actually see acceleration in innovation and inventions because of the fact that these tools will help everybody at least get to see a synthetic example of what it is that they want to invent. And that's pretty fascinating how these tools will help accelerate some of those visioning exercises.
Excellent. Well, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your thoughtfulness. I appreciate your vision, your experience, and your willingness to share both. If people want to learn more about you, the work that you do, book you for speaking engagements, buy your books, what's the best way or ways for them to connect with you?
Definitely LinkedIn is one destination, and the other destination will be executivegreatness.com, which is essentially where people will also find information on the services that we provide in terms of executive coaching, as well as our other services that we offer around change leadership and management. But definitely LinkedIn is the fastest way to communicate with us.
Okay. How about your books? Where are the best places for them to purchase your books?
Amazon.com will be the location for most of these books. We have a new strategic leader planner that's available as well, which helps leaders take time every Friday to spend what we call a meeting with self. And that helps them with visioning and understanding what do I need to do to make sure everything I'm talking about is landing and not just being sent, as you said.
Great. Ash, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been a pleasure meeting you, getting to visit with you and share ideas with you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.